Beloved Saints, today's 5-minute message of redemptive history is about the plains of Moab, Part 1, during the 40 years in the wilderness, from the second book of redemptive history series, The Covenant of the Torch. When we look in Numbers 33 verses 48 to 49, it says that during the 40 years in the wilderness, the 41st campsite that the Israelites stayed in was the plains of Moab. It says, the Israelites camped on the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. There on the plains of Moab, they camped along the Jordan from Beth Jeshimoth to Abel Shittim. First, at the plains of Moab, the Israelites committed immoral acts with the Gentile women. Finally, the Israelites only had to cross the Jordan River in order to enter into the land of the promise, the Holy Land Canaan. So in order to enter into this Holy Land, the Israelites had to be holy and pure and clean before God. However, before crossing the Jordan River on the plains of Moab, Israelites committed a sin of sexual immorality. In Numbers 25 verse 1, it says, while Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women. Everyone, one of the sins that God hates the most is sexual immorality. The reason is the body of the saints that believe in Jesus Christ is the temple of God where the Holy Spirit dwells. So we cannot defile or make this body that is the temple of God unclean. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verses 18 to 19, it says, flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. Everyone, the women that Israelites committed sexual immorality with were the women of the Gentile nation of Moab. The Bible testifies that the Moabite women led the Israelites to commit sins of idolatry. In Numbers 25 verse 2, it says, the women invited them to the sacrifices to their gods. So the people ate the sacrificial meal and bowed down before these gods. This sin of idolatry and the sin of sexual immorality that defiles the body that is the temple of God brought about an enormous result. About 24,000 Israelite people died because of a plague. In Numbers 25 verse 9, it says, but those who died in the plague numbered 24,000. Second, Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron, was zealous with God's jealousy, and he killed the male and the female who committed sexual immorality and stopped the plague. When numerous people died to the plague as a result of their sin of sexual immorality, all the Israelite people began to cry out. However, there were some that still continued to sin even in the midst of this plague. At that time, Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron, was zealous with God's jealousy, and he killed an Israelite man and a Gentile woman who continued to sin with a spear in his hand. And at that time, the plague stopped. And this is testified in Numbers 25, verses 7 to 11. Beloved saints, before the Israelites entered into the land of Canaan, God criticized their sin of sexual immorality. Before we enter into heaven, the spiritual land of Canaan, we need to realize that our bodies are the temple of God where the Holy Spirit dwells. Let us have the grace to keep the purity of our body and heart. Also, let us be zealous with God's jealousy, and let us abandon and throw away the sin of idolatry, which is prioritizing something more than God. Let us not love something more than God. and keep the faith of purity towards God. I bless in the name of the Lord.